Michael and Laura Jennings seemed to have the perfect suburban life, but behind their smiling photos and neatly kept home, Laura's secret Facebook connection with Daniel Hart would ignite a chain of betrayal, obsession, and murder that ended in blood. Michael and Laura Jennings lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone seemed to know each other's routines. Their brick house with its freshly painted shutters and neatly trimmed lawn was the kind of place people admired when they drove past. To outsiders, the Jennings family looked like the perfect picture of stability. Michael worked long days as a construction supervisor, leaving the house before sunrise and returning in the evenings, exhausted but determined to provide for his family. Laura stayed home to take care of their 2 children, spending her days juggling school drop-offs, soccer practices, and family dinners. Together they attended community barbecues, school fundraisers, and Sunday services, where people often describe them as the couple who had it all. But like many pictures framed for public display, the reality beneath the surface was more complicated. Michael's job consumed him. The long hours and constant demands left him drained, and when he did come home, he often collapsed on the couch or buried himself in television. Laura had grown used to spending her evenings alone after putting the children to bed. At first, she didn't mind. She filled the quiet with reading, hobbies, and catching up with friends online. Yet as the years passed, the silence in the house grew heavier. She longed for conversations, for laughter, for a spark that reminded her of their younger days when love felt effortless. Michael, wrapped up in the pressure of his work and the belief that providing financially was enough, failed to notice the distance widening between them. Social media became Laura's escape. Facebook offered her a window into a world outside of her routine. She reconnected with old classmates, shared photos of her children, and commented on community events. It made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. Friends would respond to her posts with compliments or jokes, and she soaked in the attention that contrasted sharply with the quiet indifference of her marriage. It wasn't that she stopped loving Michael, but rather that she felt invisible to him. When she scrolled through her feed, she could forget the loneliness that seemed to hang over her home. Their friends and neighbors never suspected any unhappiness. At gatherings, Laura smiled easily, chatting with other parents about school or summer vacations. Michael, though reserved, would stand by her side, nodding along and occasionally cracking a dry joke that made others laugh. Together, they gave the impression of a couple still deeply connected. No one noticed the way Laura's eyes sometimes drifted into the distance, or the way Michael's shoulders slumped when he thought no one was watching. In the privacy of their home, silence filled the spaces where words used to be. Meals were eaten quickly, with Michael scrolling through his phone for work emails, while Laura absent-mindedly scrolled through Facebook on hers. Beneath the polished surface, the foundation of their marriage had begun to erode. Neither of them spoke openly about it. Laura felt guilty for her growing discontent, while Michael clung to the idea that his role as provider was all that mattered. They moved through their days like actors in a play, smiling in public, distant in private. Each convinced the other no longer cared enough to try. It was in this fragile, fractured state that the first signs of trouble began to take root. One evening, after putting the children to bed, Laura lingered on Facebook longer than usual. She clicked through photos of old classmates, noticing how some of them seemed happier now than they had in school. She felt a pang of curiosity about the lives she hadn't kept up with, the paths others had taken. When a familiar name appeared in her friend requests, she hesitated for only a moment before clicking accept. That single click, made in the quiet of a lonely night, would be the beginning of something that neither she nor Michael could have imagined. The Jennings family still appeared perfect from the outside, but change was already stirring behind closed doors. What started as boredom and curiosity was about to shift their lives in a direction that would end in violence and shock an entire community. Laura's heart beat a little faster the first time she saw Daniel Hart's name appear on her screen. It had been more than a decade since high school, and she remembered him vaguely as the quiet boy who sat in the back of class, rarely speaking, but always watching. Now, his profile picture showed a man with tired eyes and a forced smile, holding a beer in one hand as though trying to mask the loneliness that clung to him. His friend request seemed harmless, even nostalgic. She told herself it was just another connection, no different than adding an old neighbor or a former co-worker. Still, something about the timing made it feel different. She was restless that night, restless in a way that her marriage no longer eased. With one click, she opened the door to a new kind of companionship. The first few messages were casual, as most reconnections are. Daniel asked about her family, her work, and whether she still lived in the same town. Laura responded politely, amused by his eagerness. Soon, their conversations stretched longer, moving from small talk to memories of high school events, inside jokes they had almost forgotten. Laura found herself smiling at the screen, laughing quietly to herself so she wouldn't wake the children. Daniel admitted that his marriage had ended recently, leaving him in an empty apartment with more silence than he could bear. Laura confessed cautiously at first that she too felt lonely despite still being married. The honesty between them became a thread that pulled tighter with each exchange. What had begun as a harmless reconnection quickly grew into a ritual. After her children were asleep, Laura would pour herself a glass of wine, curl up on the couch, and wait for Daniel's name to light up her phone. She told herself there was nothing wrong with it. These were just words, just messages across a screen. Yet each night she sank deeper into the comfort of their conversations. Daniel complimented her in ways Michael hadn't in years, noticing small details in her photos, calling her beautiful when she felt invisible at home. He made her feel young again, as though she was still the girl who could capture someone's full attention without effort. It didn't take long for their bond to spill beyond Facebook. They exchanged phone numbers, and soon their conversations moved to late-night texts and secret calls. The sound of Daniel's voice became something Laura craved, a warmth that filled the quiet hours when Michael was away or distracted. She told him things she hadn't admitted to anyone, how forgotten she felt, how much she longed for passion, how she feared her best years had already slipped away. Daniel listened, encouraged, and responded with confessions of his own. He was lonely, he said, and seeing her again, even just through messages, made him feel alive. Their connection began to take on a dangerous edge. They started to imagine what it would be like to see each other in person. At first, Laura resisted. She told herself it would be crossing a line, that it would turn a harmless escape into something real. But temptation eroded her resolve. After weeks of secrecy, she agreed to meet Daniel under the excuse of running errands. The first time they saw each other, in a quiet cafe outside town, their reunion carried an intensity neither expected. The awkwardness of the past melted away, replaced by a spark that had been building for weeks. What followed was not just conversation, but physical closeness. A forbidden thrill that made Laura's heart race in a way it hadn't in years. The meetings became more frequent. Each time, Laura told herself it would be the last, but the pull of Daniel's attention was too strong. She began lying more easily, fabricating stories about shopping trips or evenings out with friends. She deleted messages, cleared call logs, and guarded her phone like a secret diary. What once felt like harmless nostalgia had transformed into an affair built on lies and stolen hours. The guilt flickered in her mind, but was drowned out by the intoxicating rush of feeling wanted. Daniel, meanwhile, grew bolder. He began to speak of a future, a life where they didn't have to hide. He painted pictures of weekends away, of waking up together without fear of discovery. Laura felt torn between the stability of her family and the thrill of this hidden world she had entered. For the first time, she realized she was balancing on a dangerous edge, one that could collapse with the smallest misstep. In the glow of her phone screen, Laura convinced herself that no one would ever find out. She underestimated how fragile secrets really are. In the Jennings household, the silence between her and Michael was growing heavier, and he was beginning to notice the subtle changes she thought she had hidden so well. The Facebook messages that had once felt like a lifeline were already setting the stage for something far darker than either Laura or Daniel could. Imagine, Michael had always prided himself on being a man who noticed details. His job in construction demanded it. One loose bolt, one crooked beam, and the entire structure could collapse. That same instinct bled into his home life, even if he tried to ignore it. At first, he dismissed the changes in Laura as nothing more than stress or distraction. She spent more time on her phone, but didn't everyone these days? She stayed up late scrolling on Facebook, but he told himself it was harmless. Still, the signs were there, quietly stacking up until they became impossible to ignore. The first crack appeared one evening when Michael came home early from work. Laura had been startled to see him. Her phone clutched tightly in her hand as though it were something fragile. She quickly locked the screen, too quickly for his liking. He let it pass, telling himself he was being paranoid, but the image lingered in his mind. Soon, he noticed how she seemed to light up at odd moments, smiling down at her phone, typing rapidly, then hiding it the second he walked into the room. The warmth in her smile, a warmth he hadn't seen directed at him in years, now belonged to someone else. Michael's unease turned into restless nights. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the faint buzz of her phone on the nightstand as she pretended to sleep. Sometimes he caught her sneaking glances at it in the dark, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. He wanted to ask, to demand answers, but something held him back. Maybe it was fear of what he already suspected, or maybe it was the quiet hope that if he ignored it, it might go away. The breaking point came when Laura left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. Michael told himself he was only going to check the time, but his hand lingered too long on the device. His thumb hesitated over the screen, then unlocked it. What he found confirmed everything he had been trying to deny. The messages between Laura and Daniel spilled across the screen like poison, words filled with affection, longing, and promises of stolen moments together. He scrolled through them, his pulse pounding, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. The reality of betrayal settled over him like a heavy weight. Michael set the phone down carefully, almost reverently, as though it might shatter in his hands. His face burned with humiliation. It wasn't just that his wife had been unfaithful. It was that she had given her heart, her attention, and her trust to another man. The man she was supposed to turn to for comfort and companionship had been replaced. Michael felt invisible in his own home, reduced to little more than a provider, while someone else received the intimacy he had once cherished. Instead of confronting Laura immediately, he chose silence. He wanted to see how deep the betrayal went. He began to watch her more closely, memorizing her excuses, noting when she left the house and when she returned. He checked her Facebook activity late at night, using his own account to piece together the puzzle. He saw Daniel's name appearing in likes and comments, subtle but undeniable patterns of attention. Each discovery added fuel to the fire building inside him. Outwardly, Michael carried on as though nothing had changed. He kissed his children goodnight, mowed the lawn, and attended family gatherings with the same stoic expression. But inside, he was unraveling. He replayed the messages in his head, imagined their meetings, and felt rage coil tighter with each thought. He couldn't stop picturing Daniel's face, even though he hadn't seen him in years. He imagined the man laughing with Laura, touching her hand, whispering the same words he had read on the phone. The images tormented him, twisting his jealousy into obsession. What frightened Michael most was how natural the darkness felt. Instead of trying to mend what was broken, his mind leapt toward punishment. He fantasized about confronting Daniel, about making him pay for intruding on his marriage. He thought of Laura too, but the anger directed at her was tangled with love, guilt, and a desperate need to reclaim what he had lost. Daniel, on the other hand, became the target of all his fury, the embodiment of betrayal. Michael's days grew heavier, his patience thinner. He went to work, but his thoughts were consumed by the secret world unfolding behind his back. He studied Laura's movements as though gathering evidence, storing away every lie, Every excuse, every shift in her behavior, each detail was another nail in the coffin of the life they had built together. He didn't know yet how he would act, only that he would. The betrayal had ignited something in him that could not be extinguished. What began as suspicion had become certainty, and certainty was dangerous. Michael no longer asked himself if he should act, but when. The quiet streets of their neighborhood gave no hint of the storm that was building inside him, a storm that would soon tear apart not just his marriage, but the lives of everyone connected to it. Michael's thoughts hardened into plans the way wet concrete sets into stone. At first, his anger had been scattered, a haze of jealousy and humiliation that followed him everywhere. But the more he obsessed, the sharper his focus became. He wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted justice. Or at least the twisted version of justice his mind now craved. The images of Laura and Daniel together tormented him every waking moment, and instead of confronting her, he decided to deal directly with the man who had invaded his life. He began by studying Daniel from a distance. Social media provided more than enough clues. Daniel posted frequently, pictures of his meals, cryptic quotes about heartbreak, updates about the loneliness of single life. Michael combed through every post, memorizing details that others scrolled past without thought. He learned Daniel's routines, his favorite places, even the items he tried to sell on the local marketplace. It was all there in plain sight, and Michael felt a cold satisfaction in using the same digital world that had stolen his wife to lay the groundwork for revenge. The plan came together slowly, with each passing night adding another piece. Michael created a fake Facebook profile, carefully selecting a believable name and profile picture. He filled it with random posts and harmless details so it wouldn't look suspicious. Once he was confident it seemed real, he sent Daniel a message about one of the items he had listed for sale, a set of tools. Posing as a buyer, Michael arranged a meeting. He chose the time and place carefully, a quiet stretch near the edge of town, away from traffic and prying eyes. As the day approached, Michael's mind swung wildly between hesitation and determination. He still went to work, still tucked his children into bed, but underneath it all was a current of grim anticipation. At times he felt sick with nerves, questioning whether he could actually go through with it. At other times, the rage surged so strongly he could barely contain it. He told himself that Daniel deserved this, that a man who intruded on another's marriage needed to pay the price. The thought steadied him, gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. When the evening arrived, Michael's movements were precise. He left home under the pretense of a late work meeting, knowing Laura wouldn't question him. He placed a handgun in the glove compartment of his truck, its weight both terrifying and reassuring. The drive to the meeting place was quiet, the streets bathed in the fading glow of sunset. Each mile deepened the silence inside him until it felt like he was moving in a dream. Daniel was already waiting when Michael pulled up. His car was parked off to the side, his posture casual, as though expecting nothing more than a simple transaction. Michael's pulse hammered in his chest as he stepped out, the cool evening air doing nothing to steady him. The moment their eyes met, Daniel's expression shifted from polite curiosity to uneasy recognition. He had seen enough photos of Laura and her husband online to realize who was standing in front of him. The confrontation unfolded with brutal swiftness. Michael's words came out in a torrent, accusations spilling faster than he could contain them. Daniel tried to speak, his hands raised in protest, but Michael's fury drowned out everything else. Years of bottled frustration, humiliation, and heartbreak exploded in that moment. The gun, once hidden, was now in his hand. His vision tunneled, narrowing until all he saw was the man who had taken what belonged to him. The shot rang out, echoing through the still night, leaving behind a silence more deafening than sound. Daniel collapsed, the shock frozen on his face. Michael stood over him, his chest heaving, the reality of what he had done sinking in with each passing second. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The man who had been the source of his torment now lay motionless on the ground, And yet the satisfaction Michael expected never came. Instead, a wave of dread washed over him, chilling him to the bone. He stumbled back to his truck, his hands trembling as he shoved the gun away. For a brief moment, he considered running, disappearing into the night and leaving everything behind. But the weight of what he had done clung to him like chains. No matter where he went, this moment would follow. As he drove away, headlights cutting through the darkness, he tried to convince himself it had been inevitable, that he had simply taken back what was his. Deep down, however, he knew the truth. He had unleashed something far worse than betrayal. By the time Michael reached home, Laura was already asleep, unaware of the blood that now stained their lives. The children slept peacefully in their rooms, innocent of the storm that had just begun. Michael stood in the doorway for a long time, staring into the shadows of the house he had once fought to protect. He told himself it wasn't over, not yet. The cover-up, the lies, the questions, they were all still to come. And with each step he took inside, the fragile mask of the perfect husband and father began to crack, giving way to the darkness that had driven him to kill. The night after Daniel's death was one of restless silence. Michael barely slept, lying awake beside Laura, as though the sound of her steady breathing might drown out the memory of the gunshot still ringing in his head. He told himself he had hidden his tracks well, that no one would connect him to the crime. But in the darkness of his thoughts, doubts clawed at him. He replayed every detail: the fake Facebook profile, the messages, the meeting spot, the gunshot, the body left behind. Each memory was a crack in the wall of control he tried to build around himself. The next morning, the news spread quickly. A man had been found shot in an isolated area near the edge of town. Police released little information at first, only that the victim was identified as Daniel Hart. The announcement rippled through the community, stirring gossip and speculation. Laura saw the story online and gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Michael pretended to be shocked, his expression carefully arranged, but inside his heart thundered with panic. He couldn't let her see through him. He muttered about how tragic it was, then turned away before his face betrayed him. Investigators wasted no time piecing together Daniel's final days. They examined his phone, his Facebook messages, and his contacts. It wasn't long before they found the trail of conversations with a mysterious buyer who had arranged to meet him the night of his death. The profile looked suspicious, thinly built with minimal activity. Detectives flagged it immediately as a fake account. From there, it was only a matter of tracing the digital footprints left behind. Every click, every login, every message pointed back to Michael. Meanwhile, Laura's secret affair could not remain hidden. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered the thousands of messages exchanged between her and Daniel. Screenshots of their conversations painted a vivid picture of their relationship, filled with declarations of affection and plans to be together. The discovery shattered the illusion of the Jennings' perfect marriage. Neighbors who had once admired them whispered in disbelief, unable to reconcile the smiling family at barbecues with the scandal unraveling before them. When officers arrived at Michael's workplace to question him, his co-workers watched in stunned silence. He tried to remain calm, answering their inquiries with measured words, but the cracks were showing. The inconsistencies in his story stood out against the cold precision of digital evidence. His phone records placed him near the crime scene. Surveillance cameras captured his truck passing through the area that night. And when investigators dug further, they found the fake account linked to his email, his device, his fingerprints all over it. Michael was arrested within days. The charges were clear: murder, premeditation, and obstruction. Laura was left reeling, torn between grief for Daniel, shock at Michael's actions, and crushing guilt over the role she had played in sparking the chain of events. Her private betrayal had exploded into public scandal. The woman once seen as a devoted wife and mother now found herself whispered about in grocery stores and avoided at community gatherings. She had lost Daniel, lost Michael, and worst of all, lost the life she thought she had kept hidden. The courtroom became the stage where every secret was laid bare, Prosecutors presented a story of a husband driven to rage by his wife's affair, a man who stalked his rival through Facebook and lured him to his death. The jury listened to the chilling details, the fake profile, the messages arranging the meeting, the evidence that tied Michael to the scene. Each piece of proof tightened the noose. Laura sat in the gallery, her eyes hollow, forced to hear her private life dissected for all to see. When the verdict came, it was no surprise. Guilty on all counts. Michael showed little reaction as the sentence was read, his expression cold and distant. Perhaps the weight of his choices had already crushed him long before the gavel fell. He was led away in handcuffs, leaving behind the ruins of the life he had once built. For Laura, the aftermath was unbearable. She became both widow and pariah, raising her children under the shadow of scandal. Every day was a reminder of how a single Facebook connection had spiraled into disaster. She lived with the knowledge that her loneliness had set the stage, and Michael's rage had written the ending. The Jennings home, once admired by neighbours, became a symbol of tragedy, a place where silence and secrets had festered until they erupted in blood. The story spread beyond their small town, picked up by newspapers and true crime shows. People shook their heads at the headline, a modern love triangle born online, ending in murder. Strangers debated who bore the most blame, Laura for straying, Daniel for intruding, or Michael for taking a life. But in the end, there were no winners. Only broken lives, shattered trust, and 2 children left to grow up with the stain of their parents' choices. It was a cautionary tale for the digital age, a reminder that the connections forged on glowing screens can bleed into reality with devastating consequences. In whispers, it became known simply as the Facebook affair that ended in blood, a tragedy that no one who lived through it would ever forget.